The lock clicked once, then refused to turn, and that's when she called the cops on me. I was standing 10 feet inside my own cabin, listening to her heels crunch across the gravel like she owned the place. The metal handle rattled again, harder this time. Then silence. You ever hear someone realize their power just failed? It sounds exactly like that. I didn't move. Didn't flip a light. Just watched through the narrow gap between the curtains as Victoria Hayes, HOA president, stepped back and pulled out her phone like she was about to order the world to fix itself. Red taillights washed the trees behind her. Her white SUV idled like it belonged in a showroom, not in front of my cabin. "Yes, I need officers out here," she said, voice smooth, controlled. "There's a trespasser inside a restricted HOA property." My jaw tightened, but I stayed quiet. Trespasser. In my own place. The word hung in the air like smoke. Something about the way she said it felt practiced. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. I shifted my weight on the wooden floor. It creaked under my boots, just enough to remind me this place was real. Mine. Every inch of it. The smell of pine and dust filled the room. Outside, she walked up to the door again, testing the handle like she expected it to obey her this time. It didn't. That's when she held up the key. Small. Silver. HOA issued. A master key. My stomach dropped a fraction. That wasn't supposed to exist for this property. Not out here. Not this far past the boundary line. She tried again. Click. Nothing. A flicker crossed her face. Gone in a second, but I saw it. Doubt. Then she smiled. Not at me. At the situation. Like she already knew how this would end. I leaned closer to the window, careful not to cast a shadow. The night air pressed against the glass. Cool. Still. Waiting. In the distance, a siren started low, then grew sharper as it cut through the hills. She didn't even turn her head. Of course she didn't. She called them. This was part of her plan. My phone sat on the kitchen counter behind me. Silent. But something about that silence felt off. Like it wasn't going to last. I glanced at it once, then back to the door. Victoria stepped aside, giving the driveway a clear line of sight. Preparing. The porch light flicked on without warning. Bright. Harsh. I hadn't touched the switch. My pulse hit once, hard. That light was on a separate circuit. One I didn't wire. The sirens were close now. Gravel shifted under tires. Blue and red spilled across the walls inside, turning the wood into something colder. More official. More dangerous. I exhaled slowly, steadying my hands. This wasn't just about a lock anymore. Something bigger had already started moving. And I hadn't even opened the door yet. The first cruiser rolled to a stop so close I could hear the engine ticking. Gravel shifted under the tires. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground in measured steps. Victoria did not step back. She lifted her chin instead, like she had just summoned backup for a problem already solved. One officer walked toward the porch, hand resting near his radio. The other stayed by the cruiser, scanning the tree line like something out here might move. Out here, nothing moves unless it wants to. The porch light buzzed faintly above them. I kept my position in the dark, just inside the living room. The glow from outside cut a sharp line across the floorboards. Victoria pointed straight at the door. He is inside. Refusing to comply. Her voice carried clean through the wood. No hesitation. No doubt. The officer on the porch knocked once. Firm. Official. The sound traveled through the cabin like a drumbeat. I did not answer. Not yet. Something about the timing felt wrong. Like I was stepping into a script she had already written. The officer knocked again, louder. "Sir, this is the county sheriff. We need you to come to the door." His tone was calm, but there was an edge under it. The kind that comes from incomplete information. I glanced toward the kitchen. My phone still sat on the counter. Silent. Waiting. That silence stretched longer than it should have. Victoria shifted her weight. Impatient now. She pulled a folded document from a leather folder and held it out. Even from here, I could see the bold header. HOA Enforcement Notice. The officer took it, gave it a quick scan, then looked back at the cabin. His eyes narrowed slightly. Something did not match. That flicker lasted half a second, but I caught it. He knocked a third time. Harder. "Sir, last call before we make contact." The words hung in the air. Last call. Like I was the one out of line. I took a slow breath. The cabin smelled like pine and old varnish. Familiar. Steady. Mine. Outside, Victoria leaned closer to the officer, lowering her voice, but not enough. "He does not belong here. This is restricted land now." Restricted. That word hit different. That word had paperwork behind it. Or at least, it was supposed to. The second officer stepped up onto the porch. Now both of them faced the door. The wood creaked under their weight. The light flickered once, just enough to feel intentional. I looked at the deadbolt. Solid steel. Installed by me. No HOA key should have touched it. Not even close. Which meant one thing. That key in her hand was never meant for this cabin. So why did she think it would work? The officer closest to the door reached for the handle. He did not turn it yet. He paused. Waiting. Listening. For what, I did not know. The air inside felt tighter. Like the cabin itself was holding its breath. Then, behind me, the phone rang. Sharp. Sudden. Loud enough to cut through everything. I turned slowly toward the kitchen as it rang again, and this time, I knew exactly who would answer it. The second ring cut sharper than the first, like the cabin itself was trying to force a decision. I stepped into the kitchen, each board under my boots sounding louder than it should. The phone vibrated slightly against the wood counter. Unknown number. Of course it was. I let it ring once more. Outside, the officer's hand still hovered near the door handle. Waiting. Listening. The air felt stretched thin. Then I picked up. "Hello." My voice stayed low, steady. No rush. On the other end, there was a brief pause. Not confusion. Recognition. A dispatcher's voice came through, professional, controlled. "We are verifying the registered owner of this property." I glanced toward the window. Victoria stood just beyond the light, watching the door like she expected it to open any second. Her shoulders were squared. Confident. Too confident. "Who is requesting verification?" I asked. The line went quiet for a fraction of a second. That was not the answer they expected. Outside, the officer shifted his stance. His boots scraped lightly on the porch. Something was already changing. The dispatcher cleared her throat. "We received a report of unauthorized occupancy." Unauthorized. The word felt heavier now. Like it had been fed to them. I leaned one hand on the counter. Cool surface. Solid. Real. And who filed that report? Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear keys clicking in the background. Searching. Cross-checking. The system catching up. Outside, Victoria stepped closer to the officer, speaking under her breath again. I could not hear the words, but I could see the urgency in her hands now. Small movements. Faster than before. The officer nodded once, but his eyes did not leave the door. He was not fully buying it anymore. That was new. I turned slightly, looking deeper into the cabin. The hallway behind me sat in complete darkness. Quiet. Still. Then I heard something else. Soft footsteps. Not from outside. From inside. Light. Controlled. Familiar. The kind of steps that never rush, no matter what is happening. My grip on the phone tightened just a little. The dispatcher's voice came back, sharper now. "Sir, can you confirm your name for the record?" I did not answer right away. Timing mattered here. Every second mattered. Outside, the porch light flickered again. The second officer glanced up at it, just for a moment. Small detail. Easy to miss. But it broke the rhythm. And when rhythm breaks, people start thinking. I heard the footsteps again. Closer now. Then the faint click of another line connecting. Not on my phone. Somewhere else in the system. That was not standard procedure. Not for a simple trespass call. The dispatcher's tone shifted again, more formal this time. "Sir, we have another party on the line." Another party. I did not need to turn to know who it was. The air in the cabin changed. Subtle, but real. Like something just aligned exactly the way it was supposed to. Outside, Victoria's posture stiffened. She sensed it too, even if she did not understand it yet. The officer by the door lowered his hand from the handle. He was no longer preparing to enter. He was waiting for something else. Something official. Something bigger. I stayed silent. Let the moment stretch. Then, from just behind me, calm and clear, a voice entered the call. And everything outside stopped moving at once. "This is Assistant United States Attorney Emily Carter," she said, calm and precise, like she had just stepped into a courtroom instead of our kitchen. The dispatcher did not speak for a full second. Not a glitch. Not confusion. Recognition. I watched the porch through the window. The officers froze in place, subtle but real. The one closest to the door straightened his back. The other shifted his stance, no longer scanning the trees, now focused on Victoria. That shift was everything. Victoria blinked once. Just once. Then she recovered, stepping forward with that same polished confidence. "Yes, that is exactly why I called," she said, raising her voice slightly. "We have an unauthorized individual inside HOA-controlled property." Her words sounded rehearsed now. Thinner. Emily did not respond right away. She let the silence sit. It stretched across the line, into the dispatcher's headset, onto the porch, into the night air. Silence has weight when the wrong person fills it. I leaned against the counter, watching the reflection of the flashing lights ripple across the glass. My heartbeat slowed. Not calm. Focused. Emily spoke again, softer this time, but sharper. "Can you confirm the parcel identification number attached to that call?" The dispatcher answered immediately now. Quick. Precise. Numbers followed. Long, specific. I recognized them before she finished. So did Emily. Outside, one of the officers pulled out a small notepad. He wrote something down. That was new. Victoria noticed it too. Her smile tightened at the edges. She stepped closer to him, trying to pull his attention back. "You already have the documentation," she said, tapping the paper in his hand. He did not look at her. "Not anymore." Emily's voice came back, steady as ever. "That parcel is not under HOA jurisdiction." No raised tone. No emotion. Just a fact placed exactly where it needed to be. The words landed harder than anything shouted. The officer at the door glanced at his partner. A quick exchange. Silent, but clear. Something had just flipped. Victoria let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "That is incorrect," she said, quicker now, less measured. "We updated the boundary last quarter. This is restricted land." Updated. Boundary. Words that sound official until someone checks them. Emily did not argue. She asked another question. "Was that boundary change recorded with the county?" Another pause. This one belonged to Victoria. It lasted just a little too long. The porch light flickered again. The officer's pen stopped moving. He looked up. Right at her. That was the first direct look he gave her since this started. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. Adjusted. "We have internal records," she said finally. Internal. Not filed. Not verified. Not legal. The dispatcher's tone shifted again. More formal. More careful. "Ma'am, we are showing no updated filing on that parcel." The night air felt colder through the glass. Victoria's shoulders dropped half an inch. "Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it." "I was." Emily took a breath on the line. Quiet. Controlled. Then she added one more detail. "And the registered owners are currently on this call." Outside, both officers turned fully toward Victoria at the same time. No rush. Just a complete shift in attention. The paper in her hand lowered slightly. The master key slipped against her fingers, catching the porch light for a brief second. Small. Useless. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Final in a way she did not expect. And then one of the officers asked her a question she clearly was not ready to answer. "Ma'am, can you explain how you gained access to this property?" The question landed flat, direct, and for the first time, it was not aimed at me. Victoria blinked again, slower this time. Her fingers tightened around the paper, then loosened. She shifted her weight like she was resetting her balance. "I already told you," she said, forcing a small smile. "I am the HOA president. We have authority over this area." The officer did not write that down. He just looked at her. That silence said more than any argument. Behind me, Emily stayed on the line. Quiet. Listening. Letting them speak themselves into a corner. The dispatcher did not interrupt either. That meant the call was still open. Still being recorded. Victoria glanced at the cruiser, then back at the officers. Calculating. You could see it now. The confidence was still there, but it had edges. Sharp ones. "We issued a master key for compliance checks," she added, lifting it slightly. The small piece of metal caught the porch light again. It looked less impressive now. Just a key. No authority behind it. The second officer stepped closer, just one pace. Not aggressive. Just enough to change the distance. "Who authorized that key?" he asked. Simple question. Hard answer. Victoria hesitated. Just for a beat. Then she recovered. "The board," she said. "We approved it internally." Internally again. That word kept coming back. It sounded weaker every time. The officer nodded slowly, like he was placing pieces together. "Do you have documentation filed with the county for access control?" he asked. Another pause. Longer now. The night felt heavier around the porch. Even the insects seemed quieter. Victoria looked down at her folder, flipping a page that did not need flipping. Buying time. "We do not need county approval for internal HOA matters," she said, faster now. Too fast. The officer did not respond right away. He glanced at his partner. Then back at her. Access to a locked private residence is not an internal matter, he said calmly. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They landed exactly where they should. Victoria's shoulders stiffened. The smile was gone now. Completely gone. She looked at the door. Then at the key. Then back at the officers. Something was slipping. I could feel it from inside. The shift was real. Behind me, Emily finally spoke again. For the record, she said, her tone unchanged, no HOA has legal authority to access a private residence without consent or a court order. The dispatcher acknowledged quietly. A soft confirmation sound. Logged. Noted. Official. Outside, the officer nearest the door took a small step back. He was no longer considering entry at all. He was reassessing the situation entirely. That was the moment everything tilted. Victoria noticed it too. She straightened, trying to reclaim control. This is being blown out of proportion, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. I was enforcing community standards. Community standards. That phrase sounded hollow now. The second officer tilted his head slightly. By attempting to unlock the door, he asked. No accusation. Just clarity. Victoria opened her mouth, then stopped. The answer did not come this time. The porch light flickered once more, then steadied. The master key slipped again in her hand, almost falling before she caught it. Small detail. Big moment. The first officer took a slow breath. Then he asked the question that changed everything in a way she could not walk back from. Did you attempt to enter this residence without the owner's consent? The question came out slow and clear, like it had been waiting its turn. Victoria did not answer right away. Her lips pressed together. Her eyes flicked to the key in her hand, then to the door, then back to the officers. That pause stretched longer than anything she had said before. The night air felt tighter. Even the hum of the cruiser engine seemed louder. I was performing a compliance check, she said finally. The words came out controlled, but something underneath them cracked just a little. The officer did not write that down either. He tilted his head, just slightly. That was not my question, he said. No change in tone. No pressure. Just precision. Victoria inhaled, sharper this time. The property is under HOA review, she added quickly. We have reason to believe, ma'am, the second officer cut in, not loud, but firm. Did you try to unlock that door? The porch light buzzed overhead. The key in her hand reflected a thin line of light across her fingers. Small. Harmless looking. But now it felt like evidence. Victoria glanced at the cruiser again. Then back at the officers. She could feel it slipping. Anyone could see it now. The door did not open, she said. That was not an answer. The first officer nodded slowly. That is not what I asked. The silence that followed hit harder than any raised voice. Behind me, Emily remained still. I could hear her breathing through the line. Even. Controlled. Waiting. She was letting this unfold exactly the way it needed to. No interruptions. No rescue. Just facts stacking on facts. The dispatcher stayed quiet too. No guidance. No correction. Just recording. Outside, one of the officers stepped off the porch for a moment. He walked to the edge of the driveway, shining a small flashlight across the ground. Not searching. Observing. The beam passed over fresh tire tracks. Over the gravel. Over the edge where the road met the property line. He paused there. That line mattered. Everyone could feel it now, even if they did not fully understand why. He turned back, slower this time. Thoughtful. That was new. Victoria watched him, then quickly turned back to the officer on the porch. "This is unnecessary," she said, her voice tightening. "I am authorized to be here." Authorized. That word again. But it sounded different now. Hollow. The officer closest to her took one step forward. Not aggressive. Just closer. "Authorized by who?" he asked. Simple. Direct. No room to move. Victoria hesitated again. The folder in her hand shifted. Papers inside it rustled softly. That small sound felt louder than it should have. "The board," she said, but it came out weaker this time. Less certain. The officer held her gaze. "Do you have that authorization documented and filed with the county?" The question landed clean. No way around it. Victoria did not answer. Not immediately. Her eyes moved again. Door. Key. Officers. Cruiser. Like she was trying to find something she missed. Something she could still use. But there was nothing left to grab. "Behind me," Emily spoke again. Quiet. Final. "There is no filed authorization." The dispatcher confirmed instantly. No hesitation. Logged. Verified. Official. Outside, both officers shifted at the same time. Not toward the door. Toward her. The space around Victoria felt smaller now. Not physically. Legally. The difference was everything. She took a half step back without realizing it. The key slipped again in her fingers, this time making a faint metallic tap against her ring. The sound echoed in the quiet night. The first officer exhaled slowly, then looked directly at her. And when he spoke next, the entire situation crossed a line she could not step back over. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the door." The words were calm, but they carried weight now. Not a suggestion. Not a negotiation. Victoria did not move at first. Her shoulders stayed squared, but her posture had changed. It was subtle. Less control. More calculation. "This is completely unnecessary," she said, her voice tighter than before. "You are overstepping." The officer did not react. He held his position, steady. Waiting. That silence pressed against her again. Harder this time. She finally stepped back half a pace. Just enough to show compliance without admitting it. The gravel shifted under her heel. Small sound. Big shift. The second officer moved closer to her side, not blocking, but present. Watching. The kind of presence that changes decisions. Behind me, Emily stayed on the line. Quiet. Listening. She did not need to say anything more. Everything she needed was already in motion. Outside, the first officer gestured lightly toward Victoria's hand. "I am going to need that key," he said. Simple. Direct. No edge. But final. Victoria looked down at it like she had just noticed it for the first time. The metal glinted under the porch light. For a second, it looked like she might refuse. That moment hung there. Thin. Dangerous. Then she forced a small breath and handed it over. Her fingers lingered just a fraction too long before letting go. The officer took it without comment. He turned it once in his hand. Studied it. No markings. No official stamp. Just a cut key. That detail mattered. He slipped it into his pocket. Not casually. Deliberately. Evidence now. Victoria's eyes followed the movement. That was the first time she looked uncertain. Truly uncertain. The second officer spoke next. "Ma'am, we are going to need you to remain here while we clarify a few things." Remain here. Not free to leave. Not yet. Victoria's head snapped slightly toward him. Am I being detained? She asked, sharper now. There it was. The shift from authority to defense. The officer held her gaze. At this moment, we are conducting an investigation, he said. Careful words. Chosen for a reason. Victoria crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. Could not settle. Her eyes moved again. Cruiser. Trees. Road. Looking for an exit that was no longer there. The porch light flickered once more, then steadied. Inside, I could hear my own breathing again. Slow. Controlled. The cabin felt different now. Not tense. Certain. The balance had flipped completely. Outside, the first officer stepped slightly away from the door. Not toward entry. Toward distance. Creating space. That was procedure. That was control. He glanced toward the cruiser, then back at Victoria. We are also going to need to see any documentation you have regarding this property, he added. Victoria hesitated. Again. The folder in her hand felt heavier now. She opened it slowly. Pages shifted. None of them looked official enough anymore. Not under this light. Not under this pressure. She handed over a sheet. The officer took it. Scanned it. His eyes moved line by line. Slower than before. Looking for something specific. Then he stopped. Just for a second. That pause was different. It was not confusion. It was recognition. He looked up at her. And the expression on his face changed in a way she clearly did not expect. The officer lowered the paper slowly, but he did not take his eyes off Victoria. That was the first sign. Not the words. The look. Where did you get this document? He asked. Calm. Controlled. But different now. Victoria blinked, caught off guard by the shift. It is from our HOA records, she said quickly. Too quickly. The officer glanced back down at the page, then turned it slightly toward the porch light. The paper looked official at a glance. Clean header. Clean formatting. But under that light, details started to show. Edges that did not match. Dates that felt off. The second officer stepped closer, leaning just enough to see. His eyes narrowed. That was the second sign. This filing number, the first officer said, tapping the page once, does not match county records. The words landed heavy. No room to twist them. Victoria's shoulders tightened again. Her fingers flexed at her sides, like she wanted that paper back but knew she could not reach for it now. There must be a delay in processing, she said, forcing steadiness. But the rhythm was gone. The officer did not respond. He looked at his partner. Then back at her. We already checked, he said. Short. Final. Behind me, Emily's voice returned, quieter than before but sharper than anything said outside. That document is not filed. It never was. The dispatcher confirmed immediately. A soft tone. Logged. Verified. The night seemed to pause around that moment. Victoria inhaled sharply. You could hear it from inside. The air catching just slightly. That was the third sign. Realization. She looked at the cruiser again. Not for control this time. For distance. For space. But the space was gone. The second officer straightened, no longer observing. Now he was engaged. Ma'am, presenting unfiled or altered documents during an active call is a serious issue, he said. No accusation. Just fact. Victoria shook her head quickly. This is a misunderstanding, she said. You are misinterpreting, then help us understand," the first officer cut in, still calm. Always calm. That calm was doing more damage than any raised voice could. Victoria's eyes moved again. Door. Key. Paper. Officers. Nothing landed. Nothing held. Everything she reached for slipped. The porch light buzzed overhead. The sound filled the silence between words. Even the insects stayed quiet now. Waiting. Watching. The officer folded the paper once. Careful. Precise. Not dismissing it. Securing it. That detail mattered. Victoria noticed. Her jaw tightened. The confidence was gone now. Completely gone. Replaced by something sharper. Defensive. Controlled panic. "I was acting within my authority," she said again, but it sounded smaller this time. The second officer nodded slowly, like he was placing the final piece. "That is what we are verifying," he replied. No emotion. Just process. Inside, I exhaled slowly. The cabin felt steady again. Grounded. Outside, nothing felt steady anymore. Victoria shifted her stance once more, but there was nowhere left to shift to. The first officer looked toward the cruiser briefly, then back at her. His posture changed. Subtle. But clear. Decision made. And when he spoke next, his words carried a weight that even she could not ignore. The officer's voice came steady, but this time it carried finality. "Ma'am, based on what we have right now, you attempted to access a private residence without legal authority and presented documentation that does not match county records." He did not raise his tone. He did not need to. The words settled into the night like they belonged there. Victoria stood still. Completely still. For the first time since she arrived, she had nothing ready. No script. No next move. The porch light hummed above her. The cruiser lights painted her face in slow flashes of red and blue. She looked smaller now. Not physically. Legally. The difference was impossible to ignore. "This is not what it looks like," she said, but even she sounded unsure. The second officer took a slow breath and shifted his stance. "Then you will have the opportunity to clarify everything," he said. Calm. Controlled. Process moving forward. Victoria's eyes flicked toward the road again. The darkness beyond the headlights. The open space that used to feel like control. It did not feel that way anymore. Not even close. The first officer stepped slightly to the side, creating a clear path away from the door. Not for entry. For separation. That detail mattered. "For now, we need you to remain here," he added. No room for interpretation. Victoria nodded once, almost automatically. The fight was not gone. But it had nowhere to go. Inside, I finally stepped away from the counter. Slow. Measured. The wood floor creaked under my boots again, but this time it sounded different. Not tense. Grounded. The cabin felt like mine again. Fully. Completely. Behind me, Emily stayed on the line. Quiet. Present. The kind of presence that does not need to speak to be felt. Outside, the officers moved with purpose now. One walked back to the cruiser, radio in hand. The other stayed with Victoria, watching, listening, making sure nothing shifted again. The paper was secured. The key was gone. The story she brought with her had nowhere left to stand. Victoria lowered her gaze for a second. Just a second. Then she looked back up, trying to rebuild something that had already collapsed. It did not come back. Not this time. The night air settled around the cabin. Still. Quiet. Controlled. Like everything had reset, but not the way she expected. The first officer glanced toward the door once more. Not as a threat. Not as a question. Just acknowledgement. Then he turned back to Victoria. "We will continue this at the proper level," he said. Simple words. Heavy meaning. She nodded again, slower this time. The master key was no longer in her hand. The paper was no longer hers to explain. And the silence that followed felt different from the one before. Not uncertainty. Resolution. I stood there in the dim light, phone still in my hand, listening as the radio crackled outside. And then I heard the one phrase that told me this was not ending here.